Welcome to the sew along for the Colette Pattern Sorbetto Top. This is a great top to start your sewing journey, learn different techniques, making a top. It is very easy but really stylish. Here's our finished product here. It's sleeveless. There's a version that has a cap sleeve. There's a pleat in the front. There's a version that does not have the pleat. So there's also a longer version with vents on the sides. So let's take a look. It is a PDF downloadable pattern. And there's version 1, which is what we're going to make today. And there's version 2, version 3 with the cap sleeves. Okay, and then the next section is the fit guide. It shows the different body shapes. This is why I like Seamwork Patterns. It shows the different body shapes that you can get a little clue as to which size you're going to make. For version 1, you'll have patterns 0 through 16. And for version 1, you'll have 18 to 26. So for each version, there's version 2, 0 to 16, version 2, 18 to 26. You get the point. Here's version 3. All right, get your highlighter, and I want you to highlight the version that you're going to make, how wide your fabric is, and your measurements. So for this illustration, here's size 12, highlighted all the way down, and you'll be able to determine how much fabric you need, if it's 60 inches wide or if it's 45 inches wide, and so on and so forth. Okay, highlight everything that you think you need to highlight to just remind yourself. Here's supplies that you need, your main fabric, and there's, all kind of notes. Okay, here's your pattern inventory. Highlight the pieces that you need for, here's front and back for version 1, and then version 2, and then version 3. Getting started, that's what we just looked at. Find your size, lay it out, transfer your markings, trace your pieces, and cut the fabric. Here's your PDF pattern assembly page, and we'll go over this in detail, pages 1 through 14 to assemble the PDF pattern. And there's a different size there. There's version 2. So each version has its own page for you to look at. And then here's the cutting layouts. If you're just doing version 1, you've got your fabric where you're laying out piece A and piece B, the front and the back. And each version has the same. Okay. And then the instructions start right here, and we'll go through. We're going to make version 1 on this sew along, and we'll go through each step, and I'll make little tips along the way just to make sure that you don't miss anything. There's stay stitching, there's sewing front darts, there's a pleat, and you've got instructions to continue to version 2 and version 3. Okay, so let's get ready. Here's our finished top. I think it's pretty, but I hope you got some nice fabric that you like, or if you're making a muslin, which is all right also. So let's get started. Good luck. Let's talk about putting the PDF pattern together. For those of you that have not done it before, so what I want you to do is pull out page number 15 of the pattern, or if you're looking at it on your computer, look at the pattern assembly page. This is your guide. All of the pages come numbered. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 14. And when it prints out, when all of the pages print out, you see I've got these together, but we'll go through exactly how to put them together. The test square is really important. This one says 4 inches. You want to take your ruler and make sure it's 4 inches. If it's not, that means your printer is not aligned. So you want to go to your printer settings and make sure its output is on 100. but you're going to follow this sheet. So pull this sheet out, get all of your pieces together, and then you'll start cutting the right side and the bottom of the pattern, pattern sheets, and then we'll put it together. You can really use any cutter you want, scissors or a regular paper cutter, and you just lay the line along the guide, and you just begin to cut. Right side of the paper and the bottom. Keep them in order. Once you have them all cut, you've got pages that are ready to be taped. So check this. You want to go back to your pattern assembly page and notice how you're going to do a layout. If your table is not large enough, you got to scooch a little. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a tip of how to just maximize your space and time. So what I'm going to do is lay out the first 5. So here's 1, and if you notice, 1 goes right on the left side line of 2. And there's 2 notches here, you want to line those up. But most importantly, if you notice on your pattern layout, this is the shoulder of your pattern piece. What you want to really focus on is the pattern lines. Yeah, you can line up the notch. That's how it should be. But remember, you printed it out. It's on paper. Paper shift. You may have cut a little off. Don't worry about that. It does happen. This is not a perfect technique, okay? You want to focus on your pattern lines. You know what your pattern looks like. You know it's supposed to be laid out. That's the top. The front of the top, you know it's supposed to be laid out like that. So as you're putting your pieces together, focus on your laying out your pattern lines and making sure they match. And what I typically do, once I get my tape laid out, once I'm confident about those pattern lines being matched up, I will tape right there. Okay. And then I'll do the same thing on number 3. So number 2, start with lining up those notches, and then look at your pattern lines and make sure that they are lined up here and here. Because what you're doing now, you're putting a pattern together, not necessarily focusing on those notches, although that's your initial guide. But put your pattern lines together so that they line up, because remember, if you put this together awkward, that affects your fit when you go to cut. Uh-oh. Yep, the tape does that too. Okay, now here's where the fun comes in. So I've got 1 through 5 done, and I focused on putting my lines together to form the pattern. The notches are my guide, and they just so happen to line up okay. But now we're going to go to the second row. If you look at your guide, you're only going to 5. You're coming back 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now you're lining up the very top and the right side. So not much to guide right here. Number 6 just lays right here. So I do not suggest taping it just yet. Put number 7 down. Okay, you got a little bit there of the front top. And again, look at this and see what you've got on the different pieces. Okay, just continue to use that as your guide. And I'm still not going to tape just yet. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and place number 8 so that I can get a full picture of what we're doing. Okay, so I've got the dart lines to line up. I've got the underarm lines to line up with number 7, and I'm starting to bring in the back piece. So we want to make sure everything gets lined up before you start taping. And I think I got it. So here, here, and here. I know it seems like a lot, but it works. And sometimes the perfection won't get it, but I'll show you how to fix that also. Okay, I'm going to tape right here because again, I'm only focusing on my pattern lines. But I'm not going to start taping here just yet. I'm not even going to tape 6 yet. I'm going to keep going and get 9 and 10 in place. See, on number 10, as you put the piece of paper together, you may have some, you know, some off lines, and that is okay. Just make sure your pattern lines are straight and lined up. Okay, now, here's the thing. You've got piece number A already laid out, okay? It's already laid out. It's fully put together. And here's piece number B down here that's going to be cut out. That's the back. Go ahead and tape all your lines so it doesn't come apart, and then cut it off and get rid of it. And then you're going to continue to put the other piece together, because this, again, the idea is to focus on your pattern lines, not the pages. So it doesn't matter how page 6 lines up with page 1, because it has nothing to do with page 1. We're going to make sure it's lined up with page 7 because it forms the back piece, okay? I don't want to be too confusing or anything, but just get one pattern piece laid out and make sure it's taped, all your pieces are down, and then get your rotary cutter and cut the whole piece off and put it to the side. You're done with that piece. Taking piece number, the first piece, which is B on this pattern piece, it's done. I've cut it off and I kept everything in place at the bottom because now we're going to finish constructing the back piece. And I know I'm dealing with 11, 12, 13, and 14. Easy, right? Yeah, I've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And see, 10 doesn't even matter. You cut that off. But you've got the whole back pattern piece taped together, and now you can cut it. And you are ready to start cutting fabric. You've got your 2 pattern pieces cut out. It's time to cut out your size. Identify your size first. I'm making a 14 on this pattern. I'll write it down there. And I've already cut on the line. Here's a suggestion. Because the lines are so close together and there's a bunch of them, identify where your size line is and just run a line. Like take a color marker, crayon, whatever you have. There's a tape right there. And then identify your notch and then go around and make sure you know where your size line is. And remember, these 2 pieces are cut on the fold, so you don't want to cut. Okay, there's double arrow. The front piece of this garment has a pleat line, so cut on the fold to eliminate the pleat. If you do not want a pleat in the front of your top, cut here on the fold. Use this line to place on the fold for the pleat. So decide whether you want a pleat or you don't want a pleat, okay? Now, the dart, we're gonna go into how to make this dart. The dart legs have the size lines on them. So here's my dart here for size 14, and then you've got numbers that indicate where your dart point is for your size. My 14 is here. So again, I'm going to take my pen and mark where my dart line is here. You are not going to cut the dart out. This is just the lines that you're going to trace onto your fabric. Okay, there are some techniques where you cut out this line. I prefer not to because it can get off and you do need a seam allowance here, and that's just too much in my opinion. So I'll show you how to trace these lines onto your fabric. You'll need your tools, your marking chalk, marking pen, and tracing wheel.
if you're using the tracing paper. So it just depends on what you're using, and I'll go through both. But make sure you mark all of your size lines so you can cut and not make an error on where your size is. So let's talk about laying out the fabric. My first pattern piece, the front is placed on my fabric on the fold, on the folded edge. Just make sure that your fabric lays right there at the edge and secure it down. Now I'm using pattern weights because I'm going to use my rotary cutter, but if you're using pins to do scissors, just make sure you pin balanced. Pin here, pin at the top, pin at the bottom, pin at the four corners to make sure your fabric is laid out and your pattern is laid straight. And then cut around using your fabric scissors, and don't forget to cut your notches. There's a notch here, it's just on the side. This is a pretty simple top, so you're not gonna have a whole lot of notches. So let's cut out the back piece and the front piece on your folded fabric. It doesn't matter which side is the right side of your fabric when you're cutting, because it's a folded piece, so when it opens out, you'll have a front and a back. Now let's start transferring the markings from your pattern piece. Here's the front piece. It has a dart and a fold line for the pleat. And I'm going to show both ways you can do it in case you do not have transfer paper and a tracing wheel, okay? It comes in different colors depending on your fabric. What I'm going to use is a white piece because the base of my fabric is black. And I want to make sure my fabric stays. I got a real squirrely fabric. Like, whose idea was that? So I'm going to make sure it stays straight. So what I'm going to do, the tracing paper, the transfer paper, some people call it tracing paper, some people say transfer, and this is a tracing wheel. You can feel the wax on one side, it's just regular paper on the other. So when I put it in between my fabric, this is the wrong side of my fabric, and I'm going to make these marks on the wrong side of my fabric. So if your fabric, if the wrong side is here, you want to put the waxy side down on the wrong side. And then what I'm going to do, here's my line, here's my size line. I've got it here. I'm going to trace my line just like that. This is my dart line that I'm going to stitch together. Dart lines are actual stitching lines. That's why you don't cut in the middle, because you need seam allowance. So dart lines are actual stitching lines. I'm going to go over that and make sure. Okay. See how you can see what that looks like. So those are the lines you're going to put together and stitch on. Okay, and then I'll do the other side. Now I'll have two darts. Suggestion: if you do not have tracing paper and a tracing wheel to use to mark your darts, you can use pins. You can use other chalk. Pins meaning pin here at the dart point and pin here at both dart legs. You're going to put it together and make a line from this pin to this pin, a straight line, and from this pin to this pin using whatever marking tool you have. If you can't do that, you can take your ruler, making sure the pattern is laid down straight on your fabric. Take your ruler and hold it up, and then you can do a trace line here and do the same thing here, or if you want to take down. Okay, whatever way you need to get that line, that dart line, transferred to your fabric, you can do that. There's no particular rules, just depend on the tools you have. But you see I've got a line here and I've got my lines here. Now we're going to go to the machine, and according to the pattern, the next step is to put these darts together, because I've got both pattern pieces laid out, cut out. Here's my back and here's my front. Now let's mark the pleat line so that you'll have a nice stitching line when it comes time to do the pleat. This is the pleat line that you are going to stitch on if you want a front pleat. If you do not want a front pleat,
you don't have this line. You would have laid this line on the fold. But this is the line that you're going to stitch on to create the front pleat. And here's my fabric, nicely laid even on the edge, the original fold line. And then I'm just going to turn this up and mark a line so that I can have a clear line to stitch. It's 2 inches. It's exactly 2 inches from the edge, but sometimes having a line helps too. See, there you go. But it is 2 inches all the way down from the edge. So when we go to the machine, we're going to do the darts and the pleat. Here, this dart, so we can make it on both sides of the garment. And what we're going to do, the technique I like to use is pinning the dart first. So I'm going to, here's a dart point. This is the wrong side, and the line is on the wrong side of the fabric. So I want to pin the dart here, and then I want to take this line and this line and put them together. This is the wrong side of the fabric, so you're putting the right sides together. And it may take you a little practice, a little patience. I want you to put these 2 lines together with pinning, because this is fit. A dart creates fit, so you want to get it as accurate as possible. I've got the dart point pin, and I've got the first dart leg pinned. And now I want to put pins along the line, making sure I'm catching the line on the other side. A little off there. Pin through and get the other side. Uh-oh. My fabric is so squirrely. If you've got a cotton fabric, this may be easier. There you go. A little off, but you get the point. So pin those lines together. You probably do about 3 or 4 pins, but the point is to keep those lines together so you can stitch right on them. Got it. So now when I stitch, I'm going to stitch right on the line, and I'm leaving this pin just like this, right at the dart point. Okay, that's your stitching line. Here's a best practice to stitch darts accurately, because if you don't have a focus on the line, you will overshoot the dart, and that will mess up with your fit. So you see, we're so used to putting our fabric in the machine and keeping it straight, but a dart line is slanted. Okay, so the idea is you see how the line is slanted in your eyesight. So when you first start and you get ready to stitch, make the line straight in your eyesight. See how I just shifted it? So the fabric is slanted, but that's not what we want to focus on. We want to focus on the line. So instead of having a fabric in and just really trying to stay on that slanted line, put the line straight in your eyesight. Get rid of my first pin. And then stitch with my line straight in my eyesight. Okay, take out the pins as you go. Remember, they held them down nicely, held the lines down nicely. I usually get as close as possible. And then when you're stitching, remember the pin at the dart point? If that line is straight in your eyesight, you will come right off that line. And you won't overshoot the dart. Isn't that cool? So there's your first dart. Here's the second dart. I've got it pin basted, just like I did the first one. And See, the pins are right on the line on the back, and I'm going to put them in the machine to begin stitching and shift the line in my eyesight straight. So I'll stay straight on the dart and come right off. When I come over to the ironing board, here's my dart that's already stitched. I'm going to lay it down. It fits nicely on the side. Up, down motion, no need for a lot of movement with your iron. So what a nice pretty seam that is. Yeah. Do both darts. And then your next step, let's stay stitch, not edge stitch. Let's stay stitch around the armholes and the neckline according to the pattern, and then we're going to do the pleat. And let's take an up close look at our top. So we've got the darts done. This is the front side of the fabric, both darts, and we did stay stitching around the armhole edges and the neck edge. Stay stitching is a technique used to keep your fabric from stretching when it's cut on a curve. Armholes are cut on the curve, and whenever fabric is cut on a curve, particularly woven, it will stretch, and it'll stretch out of place because that's that bias cut. So stay stitching says fabric, stay right there, because we got something else to do, right? We're going to put a bias edge on this armhole and the neck edge. So that's what stay stitching is. When you see stay stitching on a pattern piece, don't skip over it. Do it. There's a reason why it gets done. Okay, and here's the middle pleat. Remember that mark that we stitched down the front fold of the fabric? It was 2 inches from the edge. Here it is right here. And once you fold it, you're stitching on the right side of your fabric. That stitch down the middle is on the right side of the fabric, because when you unfold it and you lay it down flat. So it was originally stitched, and then you open up this pleat and lay it down flat, and you've got a nice, beautiful pleat down the middle of the blouse. All right, next steps, we're gonna pin and stitch shoulders to the back piece and the side seams. Now at this point, you may wanna go try the top on. You've got the shoulders stitched in and the side seams. So go ahead and try it on and make sure it fits down your sides like you like it. Here's the side seam. And it's easy enough to take in if you like. Depend on your fabric also. So our next step is we're gonna put bias strips around the neck edge, the armhole, and I've already done this one, I'll show you. So the neck edge and armhole. So you want 3 bias strips. I'm using my same fabric. You can use package bias if you like. You can use a different color. You can use a contrast color, which is pretty cool on tops like this. But I self-made some bias strips. I have another YouTube channel for that if you want to take a look at it. But, you know, just cut on the 45-degree angle and you make strips like this, okay? And this is what it's going to look like. What I've done is I laid the bias strip on the outside. This is the right side of the top. Laid the bias strip down and you stitch. Okay, I typically do a 1/4 inch because I'm going to turn it. So I'll do the width of the foot and stitch it around the circumference of the armhole and the neck hole. And then let me show you how I stitch it on. And you can tell on the other side how I turned it. Okay, you stitch it on, here's the seam, and then you turn it twice so that you have a really neat edge right here. And that's how the top is gonna look. So let's do the other armhole. What I'll do is I'll start at the seam. Just pin it, and then just pin. And you don't want to stretch because this is bias. You don't want to stretch. Just lay it down about 2 inches at a time. Lay it down and stitch, pin it way around till you get to the other side, and then you're just gonna stitch it. Just stitch it, take the pins out as you go. A 1/4 inch is about the same width as your foot, and then once you get done, you'll be able to turn it over to the other side. So as you put the bias tape on, again, as you're pinning it, just lay it down and then stitch. I'm keeping the fabric right on the edge. Taking the pins out as I go. And then I usually use a piece of bias strip that's longer than what I need. You can make sure, and then when you get around to the other edge, you can just overlap it. But this is a really nice way of securing the seam of a neck hole, or the neck opening, or the armhole. The bias strip is stitched on to the armhole or the neck hole, whichever one you're doing, the neckline. Fold it and then fold it over on the seam. Okay, I'll show you again. Fold the raw edge down to the inside of the top. Just fold it in half and then fold the whole edge down. And this is where you're going to stitch, right there on the edge. Nice, neat stitch. Because it's bias, it will lay down very smoothly around the whole area. There you go. And then once you're done, you can come back to that same seam area and then start to stitch. And if you stitch right there on the edge, you have a nice, neat seam, just like we did here.